We're here live with Jelena, who is the founder and CEO of Noble. Very excited. We had met down in Austin, I think last year. And I said, eventually we're going to have to interview you.
Yeah.
So it's been about a year, but we're finally here live in Denver. So excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was great to meet last year when you're in your kind of previous role, and so what has happened since then. So excited to talk about the space.
And then also at the end, I do have to ask you, she once told me that she's going to be Prime Minister of Canada. So we'll leave that as a teaser here for the end, but very excited about that too. So for those that are like unfamiliar with Noble, can you just give us a high level picture? I know you guys are on Cosmos, and so I would love to talk about that.
Totally. So I'm the co-founder of Noble, as Abby mentioned. So I've been a Cosmos core contributor for 4 years or so. Before that, I was working in the Definity ecosystem. So I've seen a lot of development with respect to kind of blockchain protocols, like adoption. For me, Cosmos was always like my kind of passion and where my philosophy lies with regards to sovereignty and interoperability. So the Noble story starts actually in 2022. So I'm sure you remember Terra, they collapsed.
All too well.
Yeah, it was very traumatic for a number of reasons, but specifically for the Cosmos ecosystem, because Terra was actually a Cosmos chain and UST was the only native stablecoin in the ecosystem. And so when UST went to zero, the only alternatives for stables in the ecosystem were bridged assets. And so the whole idea of Noble was, how do we create a Cosmos chain, an app chain that would be fully interoperable with the rest of the ecosystem, where you can issue stablecoins, so work with an entity like Circle, which we ended up doing, have that native issuance, have that asset proliferate throughout the ecosystem, have a beautiful user experience, no need to do 5 clicks to get to where you want to do or where you want to go. And that was really the vision. So we went live with native USDC about 4 months ago, and that means you can mint, redeem USDC on Noble, but you can actually send that to a DEX, send that to an NFT chain. You can even use it for payments, which I'm very excited about. So we've issued about $170 million of native USDC in the last 60 days, done about $600 million of USDC transfer volume.
Which is like beyond, because you guys weren't live when we first talked about a year ago.
No, so I think we're talking, we weren't live. We were chatting about custody, just in general. How do you have more kind of enterprise support for our version of USDC? As you know, every chain, like whether you're Ethereum or Solana or an L2, like that standard is different. So yeah, we weren't live back then.
So, and you talked maybe a little bit about this earlier, but in terms of like why Cosmos, is there, for those that are unfamiliar, before we hopped on here, we were talking about like people that are in the space, they know the names, but they don't necessarily know like what they actually do and the functionality of it. So
totally,
would love to hear why you kind of chose them.
Absolutely. So first of all, Cosmos is very unique compared to other ecosystems in the sense there is no monolithic kind of infrastructure layer. You don't like even an L2 or Ethereum or Solana, it's one base layer. To do something like asset issuance, you deploy smart contracts, you mint, you burn. It's fully interoperable with the applications building on top of that layer, and that's cool. Cosmos is different. Cosmos is not a monolithic blockchain. It's actually it's an ecosystem of blockchains that are all independent from one another. So you could kind of think of it like, you have your computer, I have my computer. Those are independent machines. Like they might be made by Apple, but they're independent. We can talk over the internet, but like the stuff on my machine is like mine. That's Cosmos. So like what you build on Noble is sovereign. So we have our own validator set. We have our infrastructure. It's completely sovereign from, let's say, Osmosis, which is another Cosmos chain, which is a DEX. So that sovereignty and that fundamental interoperability allows us to kind of build stuff in a way that makes us totally free and like creative as well. So DYDX is a perfect example. So DYDX actually started out on Ethereum as a smart contract. They did a whole bunch of stuff where they did perps. They did like flash loans and other funky stuff. Eventually they're like, we want to do a DEX. And they're like, okay, Ethereum's not scalable. The fees are horrific. Let's do a DEX. Okay, we'll do it on an L2. Then it's built on Starkware. Eventually that wasn't scalable. So they're like, oh, we have to now find another place to build, and they settle on Cosmos. And for them, where they want to like scale super quickly, do all this funky stuff with like the order book and a whole bunch of other stuff, Cosmos just made a ton of sense. So sovereignty is like our number one thing. Like we want to be independent. We also want to work together, but we need to preserve our independence. And you don't have that on Ethereum. You really don't. You have other benefits, many other benefits, but you do not have that sovereignty.
And then, you were from Canada. I don't know if your co-founder is also Canadian.
Yeah.
So was that, I guess, was some of the challenges that we've seen in the US, is that similar in Canada? I guess, what are some of the bigger challenges? One, I guess, in getting started, and then two, in raising funds. VCs are looking for those big ROIs. And right now you'd mentioned to me that you guys aren't making money today.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, being Canadian is like a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because I think actually in the US, there's even more risks to kind of founding your own like crypto venture, but it's a weakness because, you're not like in the center of it all where all the like VC investments are. To be honest, it was still fine for us to like get funding. We raised a seed round. Polychain led the seed round. A couple other well-known funds. We're ramping up for our next round. But I think like in Canada, generally we follow the US in terms of regulations. Like right now, it's similarly not like positive, but I think that will change eventually.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, you see Asia markets taking off, but you can't do China. You're not supposed to, right? So it is fascinating to see. We talk to people that are like USDC down on Tron is huge down in like Argentina and then LATAM. Yeah. So I don't know if you're like, are you starting to see like trends in where people are using you guys the most still?
Absolutely. So right now, kind of, to reiterate, like Noble is the infrastructure for issuance. So we don't have our own stablecoin, right? We work with other issuers like Circle, like others, to simply put that on chain, make it super interoperable, easy to use, put it on a bunch of applications, a bunch of chains, like that's all good. The thing that we do see, because we are the infrastructure layer, is where the adoption is, to your point. And I think right now, if you look at like the kind of view of like this ecosystem on a website called Map of Zones, you can actually see where we're connected. It's mostly DeFi, it's mostly DEXs. There's an NFT chain that we're also pretty, a lot of people are using USDC on, issued from Noble. We have a payments card that we've partnered with. So you can actually use Noble USDC in stores on a debit card. So you can spend your crypto in a store. The merchant never knows it's USDC. Right. It settles in USDC on the back end, but you can actually spend Noble USDC on in stores. And so, yeah, that there, it's a lot of Asia. It's a lot of like Korea, Japan, Eastern Europe, of course, Canada, the US. So it's mostly like Asia, Eastern Europe, and then North America right now. Not much in LATAM, but that's something we want to fix.
And if you guys, like from a marketing perspective, like everyone's kind of vying for people's attention. So like Cosmos, I don't know if they've helped you guys out and what types of, I don't know if we do events, obviously, right? Yeah. A podcast, of course, it's going to be seen by quite a bit of people. But in terms of like getting people involved in the ecosystem a little bit more, is there anything that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, before I started Noble, this was like a big thing we tried to work on in terms of marketing for Cosmos. It's very hard to do because it's so decentralized. And it's, again, every Cosmos chain is independent. Technically, DYDX, the founder, Antonio, he has tweeted in the past, like, we built in Cosmos, but we are not a Cosmos chain. That makes sense. In that sense, like, it's hard to do marketing, but that's why we exist, to market for the ecosystem where we could say, well, you want to kind of use a DEX where you could have one click hop between, even actually from a centralized exchange to a DEX. In the case of Coinbase, you can actually do that today. So you can actually deposit USDC on Coinbase, withdraw to DYDX chain, and Noble just reads it on the back end. That's marketing, right? That's like that's user marketing, but you don't need to know that's Cosmos tech.
Right.
If that makes sense.
In terms of like being, from Canada, you had started, I believe, the co-founder of the Canadian Web3 Council. Yeah. Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Totally. So myself and my co-founder, we started the council as a direct inspiration from the US Blockchain Association. So we kind of saw what the USBA was doing in Washington. And we were like, hey, like we need that in Canada. It's since grown, I think 12 or so members. We're doing advocacy. I mean, I'm taking a step back. We have an executive director, obviously, that does that day to day. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely trying to advocate for the space. A lot of people don't know that Canada has led the way in so many regards. Ethereum was founded in Toronto. Todd's from Toronto. Went to high school with my husband. We're the other co-founders of Ethereum. So there's actually more than just him. Of course, he's the most famous one. But, just doing advocacy from that perspective, people don't realize like so much has happened. And so we're just trying to make it easier for people to build in Canada from like a regulatory perspective.
So we got to get into, I said, we touch on the fact that with a straight face, you looked me in the eye and said you're going to run eventually for Prime Minister of Canada. And I've heard people say that over a few drinks, like joking, I've said I'm running for president, but I didn't actually mean it. But when you said it to me, you looked at me like pretty straight face and then said that's an aspiration of yours. So would love to hear if that's been a year. So things have changed in your head. But
no, I appreciate that. I mean, first of all, I love governance. That's partially why I love blockchains and why I love crypto. And I actually think that people like currently in our space, like kind of our age or like, whatever, just people building the space, they're actually really good at politics. Like they're actually better than the actual politicians.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I think from that perspective, I think consensus building and like getting people sort of bought into a vision and just really governance and all that stuff. Like, I currently am doing that, but not on a political level. But then obviously I'm very passionate about Canada.
Right.
Canada is the, second largest country in the world. We have so many resources. We have the most fresh water in the world. That's going to become more relevant as the decades go on.
Yeah.
Many other examples of this. We have only 35 million people, and yet we have all this land. What do we do with it? So yeah, I'm interested. I think we can make a lot of change, and why not? So
I love it. 28 or where are you?
No, like 15 years from now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else you want to share? Just like in the future, what you guys are building out and people can get involved?
Yeah, no, this has been really fun. I mean, I think for any kind of listeners that are really interested in Cosmos and just generally like all the cool projects, like again, like the osmosises of the world, the DYDXs of the world, the NFTs that we have, I would just like encourage you to kind of check out what we're doing. We're kind of like a gateway to the rest of the ecosystem and, play around, have fun. I'm on Twitter. I'm always keen to chat with people and do more education on the space.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
We'll do a quick cheers for long drink here, but thanks so much, Jelena.
Thanks.